An introduction to the team and folks that are on the call. There's me, who is the regional coordinator. Then we have Mason Thurmond, who's our programs manager. She'll be joining in and chiming in during this presentation, especially because it's about Firewise gardening and Waterwise. And Mason has a background from the Resource Conservation District, so she's a wealth of knowledge. Then we have Sarah Rodriguez, who is our newest member to the team. And she's going to be dropping links in the chat, mainly this one document that has all of the links that you'll need for this chat. And then we have Larry Williams, who is our contact with the Ventura County Fire Department. He's on this call right now, and he'll chime in when we have any updates for the Firewise USA program for you all. Today is an exciting workshop because we have a guest speaker from Ventura Water. Susan Birch is on this call, and she'll get a chance to speak pretty soon too. I'm really excited because Susan and I went to University Cal State Channel Islands together, so it's been nice to reconnect with her and see all the amazing things she's doing at Ventura Water. For today's agenda, we have upcoming events that I'm just going to mention pretty briefly and tell you how you can RSVP for those events. We have a brief Firewise USA 101 for anybody that's new on the workshop. Then we'll go to Susan for Ventura Water's programs. I'll start to talk about where Waterwise meets Firewise, some of the local regulations, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. All right, so for the first event that I'd like to shout out for everyone is we have our very first Firewise USA in-person event called Firewise USA Food for Thought. I'm really excited for this event. You can join us for roundtable discussions. We'll have some group activities and a panel Q&A with some recognized leaders that are often on these calls. It's a chance really for everyone to kind of bounce ideas and learn from each other. So this is going to be kind of a networking event. Dinner will be on us, and you can RSVP online. It will be on Friday, October 11th from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. in Camarillo at the Ventura County Community Foundation. But yes, feel free to RSVP online, and ideally RSVP online by October 5th. Admission is completely free. Then we have our end of the year annual fundraiser for Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. This is happening on November 14th, and you can also RSVP for that online as well. We have excellent guest speakers at these events, and it's always a blast to just celebrate all of the work we've done and celebrate all the community members that have been part of our programs. So now I'm just going to go over briefly of what is Firewise USA. So Firewise USA is a nationally recognized program run by the NFPA, and it's been running for about a decade long. There are now 19 communities as of this month. Larry just helped another community become recognized this month. And there's over 2,000 recognized all across the US. It's basically a way for residents, so let's say you and I were neighbors and we live in a higher fire zone in the county. We might think, okay, how can we reduce our risk together? And this is basically a program that provides a framework for how we can reduce our community's risk. There's multiple benefits. There's been proven prevention of structure loss for communities that really put in a lot to the program. And then you'll also get access to Fire Safe Council resources like flyers and funding. And right now we have funding available for up to $1,000 per recognized community for about 15 to 20 recognized communities in 2024. And then there's also potential insurance discounts. There's a link that Sarah will be dropping in the chat that goes over what insurance discounts are available. Right now, I've just emailed the NFPA to see if this is actually guaranteed a discount from each insurance. So far, we've been having a narrative that it's not a guarantee and you have to check with your individual insurance agent, but we're checking to see if it is a guarantee. I'd still recommend that you always check with your insurance agent because I've seen some discounts be as low as 0.1%, but you can get better discounts potentially. But the heart of the program is really to reduce your community's risks to wildfire that are becoming more disastrous in recent years. Hopefully this slide changes now. Then these are some basic steps for the Firewise USA program: to form a team, assess wildfire risk, and develop an action plan. Those are required documents that you have to submit on the portal, your online portal, and those are available on our website. And then you'll also be required to report investment and vegetation removed every single year. This is a lot easier than it sounds. Most communities knock this out of the park. You're just going to be recording how many hours did it take to maybe trim some vegetation around your home in a year? Did you hire a contractor to trim a palm tree or remove some vegetation? How much money was that? That's all going to be recorded in the investment. And the leaders can get that. They kind of figure out different ways to get that information from the community, but it can be anecdotal as well. And then you'll input all of the investment on the portal. And then every year, you'll also be required to host an annual outreach event. This could even just be counted as a chipper event or an outreach event that talks about the 3-year action plan in some way. And then you'll apply online. So it does take a little bit of an effort to become a Firewise recognized community in the first year, since you have to assess wildfire risk and develop an action plan. Then every year it's all about just staying in compliance. Every 3 years, you'll be asked to update your action plan, and every 5 years, update your wildfire risk assessment. And then before we get into quick Firewise tips, I thought I would ask Larry if he has any updates for us in the Firewise, anyone that's applying for Firewise right now. So Larry, do you have any updates for us?
Not at the moment, other than just as people are doing their applications, they need to make sure they're using the correct forms and more importantly, using the correct format for those forms. It has been causing several applications to get rejected by the first review by CAL FIRE. And that's not just in our county. That's been information provided. It's been happening statewide on that. So that is very important. We did get preliminary CAL FIRE approval, but we don't have the formal NFPA approval for community number 20. That last late yesterday afternoon. And that was one of the corrections, was getting the correct 3-year plan on the right form documented. So we had to work through a couple details with CAL FIRE to get that done. The state has over 900 communities recognized. They just celebrated the 900th. Keep in mind, we had the 800th here in Ventura County back in May, and they had 700 in October last year. So you can see how rapidly it's expanding throughout the state and also throughout the nation. So that's it for now. There'll be some education information coming up for those recognized communities. We'll be getting in touch with them about a possible class that will help them with some of their stuff that they're going through. But more information on that later.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. And then just a couple of updates from the back end at BRFSC. As you can see, we now have a lot more of new hires and more support with Mason and Sarah on board. So I'd recommend, if you're trying to reach out on getting more information or moving along with your risk assessment action plan, reach out to the info@venturafiresafe.org. That way it can reach all of us and we can all work on whatever you might be wanting from the Firewise USA assistance program that we offer. All right, so some quick tips for you. Let's see if is the slide okay? Is it going to the next slide? Yeah, okay, great. So the first tip is, when you're on your online application, you can use the drop-down menu at the top to skip to any parts of the application. This is going to be especially helpful for renewals coming up in November. So yes, renewals are coming up in November 15th. And you can access your online portal and just update the annual vegetation removed, the event, and your investment. And then whenever you'd like to go over your risk assessment, I'm happy to hop on a call and we can go over the risk assessment together and actually fill it out from based on what you know and what I know of a fire risk safety point. And then we can draft an action plan together. And then it's always recommended to just share your risk assessment and action plan with Larry and I before you actually submit it so that we can help you improve your chances of getting your application approved with CAL FIRE. And then, like I said a little bit earlier, you'll need to update your action plan every 3 years and update the risk assessment every 5 years. And then utilize our website for sample action plans, risk assessments, and watching workshops online. One thing to note about the renewals coming up in November 15th. So if your community got recognized this year, you don't have to meet that renewal requirement. Your application was the annual requirement this year. This is for folks that got recognized last year or before. That's when the renewal is coming up, November 15th. And if you have any questions on that, we can talk about it in the Q&A, but feel free to drop it in the chat as well. Okay, so now we have Susan's presentation. So Susan Birch is an environmental services specialist with Ventura Water. She holds a bachelor's degree of science in environmental science and resource management. And as part of the water conservation team, her job is to develop and administer water efficiency and educational outreach programs for Ventura Water. So Susan, you can go ahead and start your presentation. Let's see if the slide works.
Right.
Okay, thank you. You two here.
Thank you, Natasha. I was so glad to connect with you, not just on a personal level, but also because it's just a reminder to me of what we learned in school and what I think is intuitive to everyone is that these environmental things and these things that we do to try to be more resilient really do connect. You know, everything's kind of connected. So it was exciting for me to think about how our programs enhance what you folks do and vice versa. So that's what I'll be talking about today. Next slide. So I couldn't resist putting one photo up about the Thomas Fire. I lived just on the border of the evacuation area back in 2017. So I could see everything, but I didn't have to leave home, although I was ready to go. And I was surprised, as with this photo is an example of how these palm trees would just light up like candles. And of course, an obvious reminder that landscaping and fire safety are a major, thing to keep in mind to lower your risk. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about several programs we have that have benefits for fire safety and also for water efficiency and water conservation, which is what our main focus is in my job at Ventura Water. So the one with the most bang for your buck is the turf removal rebate program. You see in this photo the before picture up on the left with that very flat, very green grass turf lawn. And then the after picture, these folks took advantage of our cash rebate and made their lawn more fire safe, also less requiring less water and also much more three-dimensional, much more beautiful. Next slide. So the highlights of the program are that it is available to all of our customers. By the way, similar programs are available to other populations here in Ventura County. I'll mention those later. It increases water efficiency and reduces usage. You end up saving money on your water bill. Typically, if you do water a lawn, it's 50, your outdoor water use is 50 to 75% of your water bill, amazingly. It's a cash rebate, $2.50 per square foot. Some of the other programs I looked at in the county are actually $3 per square foot. We have an area limit of 1,600 square foot for residential, and then that adds up to potentially $4,000. And we double that for commercial and multifamily applicants, so $8,000. You can apply it to re-landscaping your front yard or your backyard, your side yard, or even your parkway space. Next slide. The main requirements, and these are similar with others, is that the turf covered area that's to be replaced needs to, the new landscape needs to have at least 50% low water use plants. You can measure them at their mature size, even if you buy, little 1 gallon or even smaller plants. To get up to that 50% area, you can measure them at what they ultimately will be. And then the remaining area can be, of course, more low water use plants. And we also make an exception and allow for fruit-bearing trees. We'll rebate if you buy a lemon tree or some other type of fruit-bearing tree, even though they're typically more require a little bit more water. It can also include in your rebate purchases that you make for permeable materials like pavers, decomposed granite and gravel and such. And then it can also be applied to labor fees. If you have an architect come in and design your new yard, or if you pay someone to come get rid of all that old turf. We have some exceptions. We do not rebate for artificial turf. I think all the programs are that way. And also we don't rebate for impermeable areas. Like if you were to pour a concrete slab where there used to be grass, we don't rebate for that. Besides wanting to help you be more water efficient, we also want to keep the soil health and the groundwater replenishment going. So that's the reason we don't cover those types of things. And then we don't cover light fixtures or if you put in a fountain. You can do all those things. We just won't include that in your cash rebate. And then we have other programs that I'll mention that can be piggybacked with your new low water use and more fire safe yard potentially. And I'll tell you about those. So then the specific Firewise benefits, thank you, Natasha, is that simply you're going to get this support for redesigning your outdoor space to be more fire safe. So when you're doing this, you can, keep in mind all the fire safety things and, redesign it to meet those ideas that you have in mind. Also, non-combustible materials like rocks and decomposed granite are, can be part of the rebate. And then I've learned, because I actually am pretty new to understanding Firewise landscaping, but you can create non-combustible areas, pathways or stream beds between your planted areas, which hinder fire progression. And then the last point that I came up with, and there may be more, is that native and low water use plants require less water and are generally more fire resilient and easier to maintain. So next couple programs we have is we will come out and do retrofits. They're both where we will address a current system you have that's not working so well, and we'll upgrade it. We'll bring in new sprinkler nozzles, more water efficient nozzles, and then we also have a drip irrigation retrofit program. So the basics of those are they're both retrofits, as I think I just mentioned. You need to be replacing an existing working system. Both of these programs, the materials and the installation, are free. And there are some limits on multifamily properties and commercial properties. If you live in an apartment complex with 100 units, we would only cover 10% of the number of units. And then one other benefit is that well-irrigated landscaping is more fire resistant. Our next program is a weather-based irrigation controller. We call it a smart controller, and I'll tell you a little more about that. Next, please, sorry, Madonna. So again, it is a retrofit program. We would be replacing your old controller that usually sits in your garage or on the outside of your house. We will put another device in its place, a unit that needs to be plugged in like your current one would be. But the difference is, and what makes it smart, is that you now will use your phone, an app on your phone, to control your irrigation. So this is free and includes the installation of the piece that goes in your garage or wherever you place it. And we'll also program it for you. We have 8-station and also 16-station controllers. The brand is Ratio, which is a well-respected name in the world of smart controllers. And we'll give 2 free controllers per Ventura water account. There is that 10% limit on commercial and multifamily properties. So it improves water efficiency because it is much easier to program something that's on an app on your phone than to go out in your garage and kill a bunch of spiders or move some boxes to get to that controller. And you're more likely to reschedule it seasonally if it's in your hand or on your tablet. And then the weather-based function also improves water efficiency because you can set it to read to be connected to weather data, so that if there is a rain event or a high wind event forecast in your area, it'll automatically delay watering until those things have passed. I think this is the last program I wanted to mention. This is our monthly gardening series. We in fact had one on Firewise landscaping in August, but we have them focused on various subjects, most of them having to do with using water more efficiently. That top photo is Laura Bauer from the Surfrider Foundation. They have an ocean-friendly gardening program, and so she has taught several of our classes about native and drought-tolerant gardening. And then those other little graphics are from other classes we've had recently. So a couple classes that we did this year and we'll do again and again are related to our topic today. We have a class that, again, we just did on Firewise landscaping. We had a Ventura County master gardener who specializes in that topic come out and teach the class. And then we also had our city fire marshal there to answer questions and comment on some of the things that he's learned and that he deals with to help folks keep their home at lower fire risk. And then several times a year, we'll have classes, different formats, slightly different formats about how to grow and maintain native and drought tolerant plants. In October, we have one about native plants for container gardening. So as far as how those types of classes can help with fire safety, many native plants are not only low water use, but they're also fire resistant. I put a short list there of common plants that we see, in our native area: oak and yarrow and yucca, manzanita, the lemonade berry, and buckwheat as well. And then I also wanted to point out that most succulents are fire resistant and low water use. And then some also are considered to be fire retardants, or if you plant them together, they can be actual fire barriers. Jade plant, some varieties of jade plant were ones that I noted about that. And then I wrote there that ice plant is not fire safe as much as it is a succulent. And then Natasha, you wanted to point out that note there?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. So Susan's brought out like a great list of plants, and native plants are very they're more fire wise to have in your garden. At the same time, VCFD has done certain research, and there's been research on certain plants, and even native plants can have some sort of flammability. So manzanita, while a fire can go by and a manzanita might survive, or a fire could even help a manzanita in its growth, it could burn. Its flammability is so high that if you have it anywhere near your home, it can potentially be disastrous for your home. So I'll go over BCFD's plant reference guide and prohibited plant list in a bit, but I just thought I'd point out that manzanita and buckwheat are listed under the prohibited plant list. So ideally, if you do have these already in your garden, you'll want to thin them out and reduce the risk, or remove it if possible. But go ahead.
Thank you. So the last topic I wanted to point out is something that one of my parts of my job is public outreach. And back to my original point about all things being connected, and the fact that what Firewise is doing is looking at future planning and future resiliency. So that makes me want to just speak briefly about one of our big projects that's going on at Ventura Water. It's called Ventura Water Pure. And that graphic there kind of illustrates what the process is. It's recycling water, basically. But if you start with the picture on the top left, the little circle on the top left, that's illustrating the Ventura community. And then if you follow the area, the used water, the wastewater, goes down all the pipes and finally to our reclamation facility that's right on the ocean there near the Ventura Marina. And we discharge currently about 7.5 million gallons of water into the Santa Clara River estuary. But with this new program, this new facility, rather than discharge into the estuary, we're going to send that water to a new plant and use advanced water purification technology to purify the water. And then we will, following that loop of circles, we're going to inject the purified water into the groundwater system, where we actually currently get about 2/3 to 3/4 of our water now. And then we will pull it back out with regular wells and then put it back into our water system. So hence recycling water. The little points on the right of my slide there are some of the many benefits to this. One is that it meets some legal requirements. So again, our plant, which is about 70 years old, has been discharging into the wetlands, the Santa Clara River estuary, precious resource for many reasons. One of the few in Southern California, whereas long ago, 80% of our coastline was wetlands. We have reached a legal agreement with a couple of nonprofits that are focused on water quality and renewing wetland properties. The Heal the Bay and also the Wishtoyo Foundation, a local foundation. And so we are going to need to, by a legal agreement, reduce the water that we discharge into the estuary. So that's one of the main objectives that made us think about how we were going to get a new resource. And then the other one is water supply needs. As you know, we just got out of a 30-year drought, and I think the scientists figure this could happen again. And so we want to keep our water supply as resilient as possible for our community. The process itself improves water quality for our customers because that very purified water won't have a lot of the minerals and such that currently comes through the groundwater supply. It'll be cleaner than all of the sources. And so that's another benefit. And then I think I already mentioned that it's a drought resilient resource. So the basics of the technology, again, it's called advanced water purification. First step is membrane bioreactors. These are, this is technology that we needed to do to our treatment plant already. Again, it's a 30-year plant, a tertiary treatment plant, and putting in some membrane bioreactors will upgrade 2 of the steps that we currently have at the plant. So that one has started construction. And then the other 3 steps will be at our new plant, which is going right across the street in some property that we own off of Harbor Boulevard. So ultraviolet light, which eliminates the items you see there, viruses, bacteria, protozoa, and then reverse osmosis, which will remove chemicals, forever chemicals, even PFAS, and viruses. And it's a technology that's currently used maybe in your own household under the sink, reverse osmosis, but also used by desal plants and bottled water companies. I also want to mention that advanced purification, this technology has been around for about 30 years. It's used by Orange County now. If you've drank the water at Disneyland, you've drank it. If San Diego is building a huge plant now, and Monterey has one as well. The last step is UV light and advanced oxidation, and this will help with, this technology can break down cell walls and DNA and break down any remaining pollutants like viruses. And I think that's more resources. So I looked at the websites for the cities of Thousand Oaks, Camarillo, and Oxnard, and they all have the turf removal rebate. Different forms, different details, but very similar. They're all cash. I think 1 or 2 of those is $3 a square foot. They also have the high efficiency nozzles. Some of them have rotating nozzles that they'll come out and switch for you. They have smart controllers. They also have a hose bib irrigation controller. It's a simpler device than the smart controller. It just goes right on your hose bib and will control the irrigation that you have attached there. And then some of them also have the soil moisture sensors. So those cities do go through a larger organization, part of state of California, to administer their program. So once you go to their website, you'll be directed to one or both of the ones I have listed, SoCal WaterSmart and also bwaterwise.com. And then the city of Ojai has smart controllers available through their main water purveyor, which is Casitas Municipal Water District. And then a couple of resources for gardening that we always recommend are the Master Gardeners of Ventura County. That's their website, and they do free gardening workshops. I think they're primarily in Camarillo, free classes once a month. And then a couple of plant databases that we use are the Ventura County Gardening website, which is great because you can peruse it and look at, you can filter by native plants, by drought tolerant plants, and see some beautiful pictures and get the information you need on plant species to apply for our turf removal program. And then the other one there, SM Growers, that's San Marcos Growers, and they also have a pretty comprehensive database for searching for low water use and drought tolerant plants. And I think, Natasha, you were going to mention one more database.
Yeah, Susie, there is I think it's called, I think I have it at the end of my presentation.
Oh, good, okay.
The Waterwise program that basically folks can take a look at, and it has designs on how to design your landscape. And while it's not always Firewise, that one of the best ones I think I saw was a succulent garden landscaping, which you can use in zone 1 and 2, which I'll mention in my presentation just to give an idea of what folks can use. But it's a great plant database as well.
Great. So that's all I have today. That is our website, venturawater.net. And then all those programs I mentioned are on our rebates and incentives page. If we have time, I would love to take any questions anyone has.
Cool. I think we'll save your questions, all the questions for the very end, and then I'll just go over my presentation a bit. But thank you so much, Susie, for your presentation. I hope now everyone knows about Ventura Water's programs, and it's so important to support water conservation because in a very indirect way, it affects our wildfire problem as well. But everything's connected, as you were mentioning before. So I'll now be going over where Waterwise meets Firewise. Often these programs are looked at with a single lens, but when focusing solely on water conservation in a high fire zone, you could be putting your home at risk or your family at risk. And at the same time, when focusing solely on wildfire safety, you could cause a water conservation issue, which could deplete the groundwater and cause the same drought conditions that are making our fires today so disastrous in our community. So I think Susie mentioned that we were in a 30-year drought, and that definitely contributed to the state and conditions of our wildfire disasters. So doing what we can to make sure we're looking at both these lenses is so important. And I personally find it really fun to deep dive into the way both of them work and how they correlate and overlap. This works. Okay. So a good question to ask is, why is landscaping so important when it comes to wildfire safety? Well, we're going to look at the 3 types of fire exposures to help us answer that question. And at the same time, I'm going to give a little refresher on fire science. Has anyone seen that fire triangle on the top right before? So this triangle shows the 3 components that are needed for fire to occur. That's oxygen, heat, and fuel. And what happens when we take one out of the equation? Well, fire doesn't occur. So the things that humans can control is fuel. And fuel can be anything from vegetation to mulch or patio furniture. Now let's take a look at how your home is exposed to fire with these 3 types of exposures. So first, on the left, we have direct flame contact. This is when something is directly burning next to the structure, and potentially a wildfire has brought it directly to your home. So we can see here that this is an example of that. This is a fence that's caught on fire, and it's directly in contact with the home and causing that home to be exposed to fire. Then we have radiant heat. That is something burning really hot nearby. So have you ever looked at a community, maybe your neighbor's house or a home in your community, and they have a large continuous bush all around their property? That could be maybe 5, 10, or 20 feet away from the home. Well, those can sometimes cause enough heat to melt vinyl sidings on windows, which could pop the window off, or maybe a shed has caught on fire and it's caused enough heat to break your windows, and that's how you can expose your home to fire. If you have aluminum siding, that's also a way radiant heat can impact it. So right here we have a pretty nasty picture of a shed that's caught on fire and is affecting the home right next to it. And you can see that the windows are being impacted by that. Next, we have embers. So, embers are the cause of most homes burning down, as opposed to having the wildfire flame have a continuous pathway to your home. Most likely, these embers are little burning pieces that have caught wind and are flying miles ahead of a wildfire and hopping from one area to another. It could hop across freeways and then catch certain things and combust them and ignite certain things. So in this little image we see some embers have landed next to the home and ignited that vegetation right next to the home, likely causing it to ignite and then will eventually affect the home with a direct flame contact. Then we also see the ember storm has caught the little shed in the image, and that shed could potentially catch on fire and cause radiant heat. So embers are kind of causing a little bit of all of them. And they can also find their way through vents in your home, which is why it's so important to have the 1/8 metal mesh behind a vent or smaller. And this is an image of an ember storm just kind of igniting nearby vegetation. Um, so this next slide goes over the defensible space zones. So this is our planting zones that we can think of. This is how we're going to visualize that question. How can we use our garden to protect our homes during a wildfire disaster? Expert researchers and our fire department has provided recommendations of how and where to plant so that you can reduce your home's risk to those 3 exposures. They've provided these zones so you can keep it in mind while you're planting, and I'll be referring to it throughout the presentation, so remember these ones. There is zone 0, which is 0 to 5 feet around your home, so the first 5 foot of your home. This ideally should be a non-combustible and ember-resistant zone. You'll want to have no mulch or combustible fences like we saw in the earlier home. The fence was ignited, so within 5 feet you'll want to remove the combustible fence and ideally have a non-combustible fence, and then ideally no plants. Then we have the zone 1, which is the 5 to 30 feet. This is an opportunity to reduce the radiant heat by breaking up the continuity of plants so there's not that much fuel to burn, and then choosing low growing plants. And I'll share some recommendations by the fire department on height requirements in this zone so that you can prevent that height from reaching the flame from reaching your home. Then we have zone 2, 30 to 100 feet. That's an opportunity to slow the spread of fire to your home and consider exposures. Throughout these zones, you can consider the exposures to your neighboring homes. So oftentimes we share a 0 to 5 feet or 5 to 30 feet. Those are all things to consider where your neighbors are sitting as well. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty parts, looking at the local guides and requirements for planting. These may specify plant types, maintenance, or requirements in each zone. The first is our standard 515 on the left, and this identifies standards in each zone that homes in fire hazard areas are mandatory to comply with. For example, it's listed zone 0 is highly recommended to have no wood chips or mulch and no vines or climbing plants. And if you're using pots or planters, they should be ideally non-combustible. You'll see that in the standard, it still mentions to have, like, if you were to have plants in zone 0, guidelines for making those less of a risk. But laws are likely to change to be more stringent in the future. I know Larry can probably mention a couple of laws as well that might be changing soon. And then also to note is the maximum height of plants. So maximum height in zone 1 or 2, that's within 100 feet of any ground cover, is 6 inches. So if you have any ground cover that's thicker than 6 inches, then you'll want to trim that down to be in compliance. And then maximum heights of shrubs in zone 1 is 4 feet, and maximum height in zone 2 is 6 feet. So that's standard 515. It's a great one to look at for your community to inform your residents in an educational way. That's exactly what our organization does. We offer home assessments for folks in Ventura County, and we're simply educating people and encouraging folks to meet these standards. And that's something that you can also encourage too. You can also print it out and bring it to your HOA so that they know what's locally required. And Sarah, I believe Sarah will be dropping in the chat all the documents to these links as well. So 410 is the prohibited plant list, and this is a guideline. So the difference between standard and guideline, standard is going to be more regulatory. If the fire department was to come to your house, they could fine you based on what's listed in the standard, versus the guideline is a highly recommended list of plants that are very flammable that would be recommended to not have within your property. And if you do have those within your property, then to thin them out. I think Larry has something to say here. So Larry, if you want to add anything on these, you're welcome to.
Yeah, the guideline 410 prohibited plant list, that list is applicable to all new landscaping. You're not allowed to put anything on that list in the 100-foot zone. For all existing parcels prior to the 2014 date, it's a reference to recommend people to remove those type of plants or modify them to be a little bit more acceptable. But for all new landscaping, you're not allowed to use anything on the prohibited plant list.
Okay, good to know, good to know. So I guess if you find any of the plants that you already have in this list, you can probably thin it out or ideally remove it, but no new landscaping. Good to know. Thank you, Larry. And then the prohibited plant list, you can take a look at it, but we're gonna take a look at the plant reference guide in a second. So the plant reference guide is intended to reduce risk, and I'm actually gonna walk us through this guide in particular. So this is the plant reference guide, and you can use it to reference certain plants within your landscaping. I like this one, especially for this workshop, because it also mentions water over here. So in order to read this list, you're going to see that they have types. So GC means ground cover. Then it says shrub or tree type. It also mentions what type of water level the plant may require, whether it's very low or low, medium or high. And then it says whether the vegetation is native and if it's evergreen or deciduous. And it also has a nice color-coded thing going on as well. To note, the most important part of this is desert species with an asterisk at the end of the name means that it should not be allowed within 30 feet of a structure. And if it has the number 50 at the end of the name, then ideally it's not allowed within 50 feet of the structure. And if it says 100, then it's not allowed within 100 feet of the structure. So we can take a look at the example of the manzanita. So this is the manzanita right here. It says there's going to be multiple types of manzanita listed on this list, and it's a ground cover type, and it requires low water level, but you can see at the end of this name, it says the asterisks and 100s. So that means that the manzanita is ideally not to be planted within 100 feet of the home, and if you already have it, then you want to thin it out and make sure it's away from other vegetation. All right, so moving on to the next slide. So this one is going to be Mason. Mason's going to mention some mulch requirements for us. So Mason, you can go ahead and take it.
Okay, this is really easy. We're just going to read through the table together. And I'm going to point out, oh, perfect. Thank you. I'm just going to point out with the pictures on the right, the difference between mulch and chips. So there's kind of a visual representation. As you can see, the top left photo, gray, that's just gravel. And then the bottom photo, the light brown, that is one representation of chips. Those are nice and uniform. If you've ever participated in a chipper event, you know that sometimes they're bigger, wonkier, a little crunchy in some ways, not always as uniform, but that is one representation of what wood chips look like. The top right photo, the dark brown, that's mulch. So there is a difference between mulch and chips. Typically for gardening purposes, mulch is a little bit more desirable. So one official definition is compostable material that includes landscape waste, leaves, yard trimmings, whole plants, or other plant byproducts that have been composted or processed in some way, and then reduced in size. So there's a little bit more organic matter. It's typically a little bit more moist, and for planting purposes is sometimes more desirable for retaining that soil moisture. Both are flammable. So standard 517 applies to both. So you'll see in zone 0, as Natasha has mentioned a couple times already, no mulch, no chips, only non-combustible is what we're going for. In zone 1, which is 5 to 30, there's just like a square footage requirement, and it needs to be non-uniform or like non-continuous. So we want to create breaks between where the mulch is applied. So if you do have a certain plant that really needs, maybe you're putting in new plants and they really need that mulch, or you're trying to restore the soil health in a certain area, you can still apply it in that zone. And then there just needs to be 5 feet of separation between the next kind of chunk of mulch or chips. And it needs to be 20 by 20 or smaller. So it's still a good amount of mulch that can be used in that zone. And then 30 to 100 feet, there's no limitation on application areas. That doesn't necessarily mean that like we encourage it, because there still is a risk. And it if you've gotten a home assessment with us, you know that, okay, the mulch is connected to the shrub over there. We're still looking for discontinuity, and that still overall is going to reduce your wildfire risk or wildfires risk to your home. But technically there is no limitation. And then for over 100 feet, it's just basically saying it's the same as zone 2. So that's my piece. Thanks, Natasha.
I appreciate it. Something new to me was keeping, I mean, I knew this from a risk standpoint, but I didn't realize that Ventura County Fire Department outlines it, that it's recommended to keep combustible mulch 12 inches away from any tree trunk or combustible fences. So that's also good to know as well. All right, so I do have here, let's see, fire and water smart gardening tips. I just thought I'd share some images of landscapes that kind of follow the rebate program that Susie was talking about earlier, where you can transform your landscape from just grass to be a bit more water conservation friendly, more nature friendly, and friendly for local wildlife as well, at the same time viewing it from the fire landscape point of view. So what can you see here, basically? What I'm seeing is that there's some permeable hardscape on the right with gravel and non-combustible mulch. That's going to be great for stopping the spread of fire and then also allowing the groundwater to be replenished. So you're preventing drought there and slowing the spread of fire. You'll also see that sometimes they have some plant separation, more plant islands, low growing and native species. Succulents are always a great one to go to as well. The one on the right is cool because they also have an example of a non-combustible fence providing some privacy as well, privacy barrier as well. So if you would like to learn a little bit more about some of these landscaping and see even more images, you can visit firesafemarin.org. This is where I got these images from. They have great resources on how you can maintain privacy at the same time be in compliance with some fire risks to your home as well. And then I also wanted to add in here slope considerations. So I stuck another triangle up at the top right, and that's the fire behavior triangle. So this is how fire can spread. And what is involved in that is weather. So weather conditions include wind and maybe really dry conditions, which can dry out a lot of plants. And then topography is a really important one as well. That could be slopes. So right now we're going to be looking at slopes. That's because fire can go up a slope incredibly quickly. So there's a bit of a different planting recommendation when it comes to slopes. And you can see on the left, the fire is just escalating very quickly. So you'll want to, on a slope, control erosion, so still maintain some sort of plant species or have that hillside be intact while also slowing the spread of fire. So that can involve appropriate plant and tree spacing, continuing with that low growing plants and use of hardscape. And then non-combustible retaining walls are a great way of doing that as well. And again, if you want more images on how some homes have thought about fire safety, erosion, and water resources, you can visit firesafemarin.org to check that out as well. And then this goes into the slope requirements as well. So this is also listed in VCFD's standard 515, but ideally when it comes to, I believe it's standard 515, I may be incorrect. But when it comes to slopes, you'll ideally want to look at a shrub and see the height of that shrub, and then see 2 times the height of that shrub. You'll want it to be vertical spacing. That's when you're on a flat or a mild slope. But as you increase the slope, the flame height increases. So the flame height on a mild slope, about 20% to 40%, is 4 times the height of that bush, which is why you're going to want to plant the bush 4 times the height away from that existing bush. And that it increases as you go to a higher and higher slope. And this is the same thing with trees. And then I also like the image on the right because it shows vertical spacing for your trees. So ideally, a good practice is just have no shrubs near the base of a tree. But if you do have shrubs near the base of the tree, you'll just want to measure the height of that shrub and go 3 times higher to have some separation between the lower shrub and your tree. That's to prevent maybe a low growing fire from reaching the canopies of a tree and then catching the wind that's up there and causing embers for the whole community. So having that separation is really crucial. And then finally, we have other helpful resources. Waterwise Garden Planner is what Susie was mentioning earlier. That's another thing that you can check out on your own. And then Fire Safe Marin is what I was mentioning earlier as well. And then I just love this image. This is a great image of native trees, native landscaping, and beautiful separation of all of the different types of vegetation, and then having their zone 0 cleared as well. And then in the back behind the trees, you can see they have a non-combustible fence attached, but then they have a combustible fence all around. So it's a great example. But I'll stop sharing my screen now so we can go to Q&A for anybody that has any major questions on any of the things that we present on today. And I think Mason will be leading this one. So Mason, if there's anything in the chat that has been said, we can address that as well.
Okay, we did answer, I hope, Leslie's question in the chat. So she was asking heights of 4 and 6 feet maximum, and that was specifically for shrubs. And there's also another consideration, like a column in the table, or sorry, a row in the table for groupings of shrubs. So it does get pretty specific, and I think it's probably best to refer you there. And then I mentioned that like trees don't have height requirements, and Larry refined, they do have spacing requirements. No new trees within 10 feet of a building. That's important.
There's another item on the trees. Yeah,
Say that one more time.
Larry. Yeah, for the trees, there's also, besides having the spacing, there are vertical clearance requirements from the ground to the lower branches, and it also increases if you have shrubs, approved shrubs under the trees. So you gotta look at the details in the standard in the graphics.
Yes, yeah, I think it's best if you're curious. It's easier to look at the table within the document than for us to read each of them. And if you all want, we can, it's linked in that document, but we can also maybe screen share just that table. so people are familiar, and if they have questions on how to read it, we can go over it. Kevin has a question. Any consideration for applying frequent irrigations onto non-contiguous combustible mulch, e.g. under avocado trees that are co-located within the further out zones? Which is like kind of a tricky question to address. So do you want to tell us the zone and the distance between the tree and like what we're getting at there, so we can answer it a little bit more specifically? Because the short answer is it depends. If you want to,
the natural, I guess if you're talking about the natural mulch that's created by the tree, like natural byproducts of the tree for avocado trees, I guess in zone 1, you're allowed to have some of that natural thing. It just you have a certain requirement of how many inches that can be. Have a natural mulch is fine, but it can't be more than 6 inches, as far as I'm aware. And Larry, you're welcome to chime in here as well.
Maybe 3. So for he said 20 by 20 spacing. So within your 30-foot zone, do you have the avocado trees, or are we hypothetically speaking of avocado trees that are okay within 30 feet? Larry came off mute. I was gonna guess no, but I'll let Larry speak to it.
Yeah, the requirements for the mulch, the whole purpose of we know it's got some beneficial uses for both agricultural, also for landscaping stuff, and for water conservation, soil moisture retention, weed suppression. However, it is normally combustible. Fire has gone through mulch patches. The thing that we are looking at is, by keeping it low, we want to make sure that it keeps it away from the structures based on the flame heights it could generate, and blowing it. That's why it's not allowed within 5 feet. And then that area, outside in zone 1, by keeping it low and providing some breaks, it won't just continually burn through it. Then it will hit a break and it should stop without any suppression efforts. Or if we do need to, it's very easy, like keeping it low. You can use a shovel or even your foot or boot, and you could knock a break around where it may be on fire to stop it from spreading. So that's what we're looking at. Once you get beyond 30 feet, then we're not doing any type of break requirements on there. And a lot of stuff has come out from studies done by University of Nevada Cooperative Extension, and then also analysis done during and after fires, where it all comes out from.
Thank you, Larry. I think we're at the 2 p.m. mark, so I just want to make sure that if anybody has any questions for, I've been saying your name, Susie, because I'm used to saying Susie, but you also go by Susan. But if anybody has questions for Susan, if they can say it now, otherwise we'll let her go. That way she can go to her regular scheduled work day. But any questions for her on Ventura Water and their rebate program? All right. Okay. Then Susie, thank you so much for your presentation.
Oh, thank you. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Or you can stay on too if you have
It is very interesting. I'll stay on.
Yeah, okay. Then
Yeah.
go ahead and stay on. So then any other questions for plant requirements, maybe what's happening in your neighborhoods and how we can better communicate this and apply it to your neighborhoods?
I'm curious to know your guys' reaction when you tell homeowners about all these plant requirements, because that's what I'm getting a lot of reaction of, like, are you kidding me? And then it's sort of like they're never going to do it, or they're really hung up on that. And what's your experience? Some people are going for it, most people aren't. What's happening?
I'll be happy to respond to that, Kevin. First of all, for all new landscaping going in, they don't have a choice. That is the requirements of how they need to install landscaping if they're in a fire zone and within the 100-foot zone around structures. The paradigm is changed. It's no longer, overplant and hide and stuff. The homes are burning down, and landscape and and materials in that zone, along with, putting a hardened home and upgrading are the causes. And we've seen that throughout not only our state, throughout the nation, we've seen it in other countries of that. So for all new going in, that is the criteria that needs to be met. For all existing, we're wanting people to start thinning out the areas to bring it into what it is. And it all goes back to state law that if you have a structure in a fire zone, you are mandated by law to provide your defensible space. And it speaks to the fuels to be maintained and spaced in a manner. And then it does allow exceptions for single specimens as long as they won't readily carry fire or cause that fire risk. So when you look at all the tenets of the actual law and what's there, the document we put out brings that together in how to apply that defensible space. As far as zone 0 goes, the 5-foot ember resistant, the Board of Forestry is still working under those requirements, and the law is that it will be a retrofit once those go into place 1 year after for new structures. There is, it's on the governor's desk. I don't know if he's going to sign it, is to extend the retrofit up to 3 years, which we think is better because we're just not going to be able to do that. But also keep in mind right now, we in Ventura County's been ahead of the state on that. We implemented the zone 0 because we saw the importance of it, all the research studies during, before, after fires and stuff. But also, the insurance companies are starting to enforce it for us, and they're requiring a non-combustible zone. We're letting people put some vegetation in there, minimal, a little bit amount to provide some, aesthetics and some, be reasonable and stuff. We're not trying to go out and chop down trees and stuff, but the insurance companies want nothing combustible in that zone at all. And unfortunately, they're the ones sort of driving it. We're trying to be reasonable in our application. And that's where the state's going to be too.
What zone's that, Larry? Is that the 0 or the 1?
The zone 0.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When you said new landscaping, if somebody has an existing home and decides to re-landscape, they don't need a permit or anything for that. So you're talking about new construction, right?
Yes, no, they do.
Now,
Now, it depends on what jurisdiction you're in. I know in the unincorporated counties, they have some thresholds that triggers a permit because there's state water efficiency landscape requirements and everything. So, each of the cities are a little bit different. But if you're going to do major overhaul your landscaping, check with your planning department first. But if you're in a fire zone, we require any overhaul of landscaping. It's not going to stop my wife from going down to Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever, and putting a couple plants, and hopefully she doesn't put them where they should be put. But if you're going to tear out your landscape and redo it, we want that new landscaping to meet the requirements. And part of that is we don't want to come back when the state gets done with their regulations and come back in 2 or 3 years and say, oh, by the way, now you have to go take that stuff out that you just spent money on. But more importantly, we want you to know what's the appropriate thing to put in that zone and to better protect your house. That's a slow process. We've been trying to educate homeowners associations that also, look at, plans and stuff when people do things. But definitely all new development, there's no question there, it has to be done. But again, we're from the fire department, we're looking at it only if you're in a fire zone. Outside of that, we don't have requirements, but some of the planning departments may, based on the amount of landscape redo that you're doing.
What about vacant lots next to structures that are within the zone 1 or 2?
Okay, so state law, if you're in the fire zones, you're required your 100-foot defensible space or to your property line. You're not required to cross the property line. Ventura County ordinance in our jurisdiction, we cross the property line, but whoever owns that land is responsible for the portion of the defensible space. So if you have 70 feet from your house to the property line, you're required to do the 70 feet. Whoever owns that property adjacent to you, whether it has a building on it or not, is required to do the 30 feet. And we've been enforcing that regulation since 1931. And state law has actually just recently changed 2 years ago that codifies our ability to do what we've always been able to do as being more restricted as a governmental entity. So that's how we address it. The state in a lot of counties where CAL FIRE is involved, they just look at the properties with buildings, they stop at the property line. And I go up and down the state and I'll see homes and 20 feet away is a vacant lot with a bunch of brush on it, or so big of a property, they only deal with the houses on that property and they don't clear it. And then that's why those counties lose more homes during fires than we do.
Okay, so that's right now, that's just a Ventura County requirement. You don't know if the governor's going to sign the bill that makes it statewide or?
There's no proposal for
Okay, my misunderstanding. I'm sorry.
The law has changed to allow a local agency, i.e. fire department, to require the full 100-foot across the property line and cost apportionment, and that's easy. We do that. State is not enforcing; it has to be done by a local agency. We like the state to go for it, but and we like the state to apply it to their own property. But unfortunately, they don't consider themselves a person, so they tend to balk in some of the state agencies. But we do pretty good. I know we're long on time here.
Well, thank you.
Well, I'm always happy that everyone's engaged during this time, the Q&A. So definitely, if anybody has any other questions, you're welcome to share it. I think we'll probably just end at 2:15, but we'll stick around till then in case there's any other conversation that wants to happen.
I always have questions, right? But, I mean, it's not really, I was sitting at the MAC and there's a new development going in a high fire zone and it's going to be an HOA development. So I wondered for Larry, is there any coordination between planning and Ventura County Fire about when they bring their HOA CCNRs, are they the planning gonna look for what are their landscaping restrictions in their CCNRs for a new development?
Unfortunately, fire doesn't review CCNRs, but we have the basic requirements and conditions upon the development. And once they build it on whoever owns the properties, that they have to maintain that defensible space in accordance with our ordinance and state law, whichever is more restrictive. So it doesn't matter what they have in their CCNRs, they may be more restrictive, but ultimately when it comes to us, if we're more restrictive than the CCNRs, then they got to meet our requirements. They should adapt their CCNRs to specify that, but
yeah, that would make your life
would
make your life a lot easier if they did that.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
But mine will be easier in April because I won't have to worry about it anymore.
Oh, I got a real important question, Larry. How busy are you helping Firewise communities, bless their wildfire assessment documents?
Well, we have for those that are pretty much in like a tract type development stuff, we've instead of coming out and doing a walk around and giving them observations and recommendations, they're consistently the same observations and recommendations. So I have a standard sheet that we send them to use when they work and put their assessment together. When we get into a rural community where it's all custom built and different lots and types and uses and stuff, it's a little bit more difficult. But again, we give them the criteria of what they need to look for, and then they pull that together to do their assessment and then convert that into their 3-year plan that they have to submit to the CAL FIRE. It goes to the NFA portal, but CAL FIRE is the state reviewing agency. Every state has a reviewing agent group, and for California, it's CAL FIRE. And they're doing a very thorough job. They're not just rubber stamping things.
Yeah, and on that, are the forms on the Regional Fire Safe Council website the correct ones, like you were saying earlier? That somebody
I haven't looked on the Fire Safe Council site, but I know we have the forms on our site.
Okay,
under our Firewise page.
got it.
Larry, I actually had a question. So, we recently, I know as a community, as Ventura County, we got the fire reduction community list. I think you're a huge part of that. Um, we're now listed under the fire risk reduction community list. What a long name. But I was wondering, so I think that qualifies for some sort of insurance discount. Would you want folks to ideally let their insurance know, or is it automatically applied, that discount?
Well, both. Well, and it's not an automatic. First of all, it is one. The list was developed mainly for purposes for entities that are applying for grants to get a priority on grant funding, because they made that list. It's the Fire Risk Reduction Communities list. And we have it on our website. We're one of 50 governmental entities in the state that made the 2024 list. It's good for 2 years. The other side of it is the insurance regulations require the insurance companies to recognize that in their rate package and offer a reduced rate for those communities that are on that. And because we did it under Ventura County Fire Department, it includes all the area within our county, within our jurisdiction, except the cities of Ventura, city of Oxnard, and city of Fillmore, because they're not in our district. So everywhere else, people can benefit. As far as notifying it, by all means, people should let their insurance companies know. But also the insurance companies, that list was provided to there's companies that provide information to all insurance companies, Verisec and some others. They should also have that updated and everyone's seeing the same thing. Keep in mind your insurance stuff, they're still reviewing the rate packages that were required last year. So some people still aren't seeing these quote discounts. Also keep in mind that you may think you're getting a discount from what you already have, but their rates are based statewide, not each individual property and stuff on how they set. So some areas they may have reduced the rates tremendously. In other areas they went up tremendously, but overall they're within the percentages of whatever the insurance commissioner allowed. But that's all with the insurance department. And questions on that, go talk with the Department of Insurance.
Thank you, Larry. And would you remind me, so is the city of Ventura, city of Oxnard, and what other city that's not?
Fillmore.
Fillmore.
They have their own fire departments, so they're not part of our district. Unfortunately, none of those three did not apply for that list.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you, Larry.
There was things that they needed to meet that they couldn't meet.
Makes sense. Well, I think we're nearing the ending of our time here, but it's always great to have Larry and Mason on this chat. And then also, I always love to see the participants. So thank you so much for coming, Kevin, everyone. And then Susan, thank you again for your great presentation. It was lovely to see you and to see you present. But if anybody has any questions, as always, feel free to reach out. The new thing that I think I'm going to recommend is reaching out to info@venturafiresafe.org. That way we can tackle any questions as a team and disseminate and get to you all in a timely manner. And stay tuned for next month's workshop as well. All right, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.